meeting of council. If you'll stand and join us for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you continue standing, please, and pray with me? Lord God, it's an honor to come before you, Lord, to just say thank you, Lord. To say thank you for being who you are, Lord, whether it's been a relaxful Monday or whether we've came in squealing on two wheels, Lord. We just know that you're always in control. You're always God. You're always full of mercy. You love us, Lord. Thank you for giving us this time tonight. Lord, I pray that the words we say, that they please you, Lord. I pray that the actions we take, they please you. I pray all these things in your holy name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
That brings us to the public comment portion of the evening, and I just wanted to start with a brief. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes, and they are not an interaction back and forth with council. They're more to be like your 3 minutes to express your sentiments, and then if the item is of extreme importance, council will add it on or probably talk about it another time, but council will be limiting public comments as always to 3 minutes, and Mr. Kobo will time us if we have any of that one.
No one signed up for the public hearings, but I think maybe some of these people meant to sign up.
So there were 2 sheets, one for the public hearing, which will be for the church, and then one just general public comments. Are these people, Yolanda, Rex, Jennifer, Vicki, Larry, and Tim for all for the church? For the church, okay. All right, so we'll just hang on to y'all. Okay. So would anybody like to speak in public comment? Well, thank you very much. So that brings us to additions, deletion, and approval of today's agenda. I have a couple of things. We're going to change item number 22. We'll still have the attorney-client privilege regarding a lawsuit, but it will not be Selco.
Will not be what?
It will not be Selco because they got lawsuit.
Still closed session.
Yes, sir. But we'll do that at the end of the meeting to not put anybody out extra time. Number 18, I need to scratch because we're still not finished. And number 20, I still have not gotten the information from the county, so I'll also scratch that. And if anyone else have any further changes or yes, ma'am.
I'd like to add an item, it's kind of related to the rules of procedure, talking about the disposition or disposal of village property and what kind of procedure we should have on that.
You want to add that to number 18
Maybe instead of.
I'd like to add something about the repairs needed for the sprinkler system at Town Hall.
Let me do that for the finance officer.
Okay. And also the repaving of the parking lot. We can stick that in the finance.
Okay. We'll make that kind of like 5A, the sprinklers, and 5B,
Sure.
the parking lot. David, anything from you? So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So motion.
Second.
All in favor? And I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
So motion.
Second.
All in favor? So that brings us to Cheryl.
Okay. You have the July financial reports, the first month of our fiscal year. And during the first month, we have a lot of upfront payments, things like dues and subscriptions, insurance. And we paid for the first quarter of the deputy, the law enforcement. Our legal fees were a little high this month, also almost $4,300. We also received the first half of the American Rescue Plan funds. It's at the very bottom of the report, $278,812.88. Are there any questions on those statements?
Not on those statements, Cheryl, but I've got just a general question.
Sure.
Not to put you on the spot.
It's okay.
But our shared revenues, especially sales and use taxes, how many of those on a yearly basis are generated by businesses within the village?
No, not really, no.
Okay.
The sales and use tax is compiled countywide. Does that help? And and then they get allocated amongst the different entities in the county according to the percentage of the ad valorem taxes overall. And we won't get our first payment in that for this year until October, because everything through September was generated through last June and it goes into last year.
That's my second question. Okay, good. Thanks.
The other ones, the other sales taxes, those are on Wesley Chapel.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have some training coming up. There's a Zoom class, and we asked Planning Board and Board of Adjustments if they wanted to attend. And I had one Planning Board member, 2 Board of Adjustment members, and one's a possible. And then Amanda wanted to send or have Amy participate in it too. So I just wanted approval that we would spend up to $510 for those people to do training. It will impact our training budget, and depending on our election this year, most of our training was budgeted for newly elected council or mayor or whatever. So we will probably have to do a budget amendment.
At that time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, I would like to make a motion that we spend up to $510 for the training.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Does that cover the one maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All in favor?
Okay. And then Mike had added the repairs to the sprinklers and the parking lot RFP.
Do you want to talk to that?
Everybody who's come to the front door recently, the area to the right is soaking wet from a leak in the sprinkler system, and all the rest of the grass is brown because the sprinkler system isn't working properly. It needs to be investigated. We were getting a bill of almost $1,000 a month for a water bill, which is outrageous. We need to spend the money on. First of all, I'd say immediately have the landscaper shut the system off. I don't know why we didn't do that initially, but also pull money from contingency to specifically look into the repair costs. And then we have no idea if it's going to be a few $100s or a few $1,000s, based on how to investigate it. So I don't know if we can put a dollar amount on this, but we need to approve. So Cheryl will start making some calls to get it repaired.
But we've identified where the problems are.
Yeah, the only spot on the grass that's green.
Okay.
Well,
And
that's
so,
the leak. It's pretty squishy. It's where the rest might be fun.
right, somewhere where the water's coming up out of the ground.
Yeah, but yeah, that's, like, the might be there, but it's that off, I guess.
Right.
Not knowing what we're looking at exposure-wise, would it be prudent just to motion that she request bids?
What I'd like to do is contact the person that originally installed it. He would be the most knowledgeable about the system. He knows where all the pipes are buried, for example. We're not sure if he's still in business or not, but I think we need to give a blanket approval for $1,000 just to have it investigated, and then come up with a quote for repairs. It could be a simple thing where we dig a hole and find a break and fix the break for only a few $100s out. I kind of doubt it. So,
We handle the fountain at the park.
uh,
We'll talk about that later.
we'll talk about that when we get to Parks and Rec.
Yes, yeah, but I mean, did we do the same thing? We authorized a certain amount of money for John to call someone?
We authorized up to $520 for it to be pulled,
That was after we had the quote.
and figured out whether it's a problem with the motor or not, which it turned out to be. And then there was going to be a separate quote for repair or replace.
The quote we got for the 500, we had ahead of time, so we knew how much to approve. That's my point.
We have no idea what the sprinkler system would cost to repair.
Right.
But anything's going to be better than $1,000 a month we were spending on our water bill, which is going on in one spot.
Did we actually look at the usage?
The usage went down a lot this last month. It went down to like $590.
I'm in
That's
the
still-
gallons.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's directly
And we
correlated.
had the landscaper,
I know, but I'm rather just think about the gallons and how much we're using. 'Cause
I don't have it in front of
the
me.
rating system.
we
Yeah.
had the landscaper reduce the amount of time the sprinkler ran, thinking it was a problem, it was just running too long. It's actually a problem with leak in the system, and it has to be diagnosed and repaired.
Well, it's always been high. I don't think the leak is the whole problem. We're not going to.
So, one of the things I would like, I read over the information you sent the last month or so about them, and I would like to have more documentation on what type of heads, what flow rate, a layout of where they are.
We have that in the contract.
I didn't see it in the stuff show, so.
Didn't I send out something?
You sent out something, but I didn't see those details. I saw it say X number of heads, but it
Yeah.
didn't have specifications.
The bids didn't have specs.
Right, but I didn't see anything that had any specs, so if we get the same guy, I would like to have some specifications, so we actually know what we have installed. And where it is.
We do have a layout. I remember them coming and after the fact coming back and giving us a layout.
And then the other thing is after, just kind of thinking about the cost of water, and that we're just doing it for green grass, and there's, not that much traffic in and out of town hall, are we watering more grass than we really need to for the town hall?
That's why there's different zones.
Definitely in the front.
We can
but I'm
reduce the
just-
number of zones.
Us to maybe think about that too, as another way to reduce our water usage without harming the aesthetic of the town hall.
Right now, if you walk out the town hall, turn to the left, you'd be in dry grass that's brittle and broken. If you step off to the left, you'll be up to your ankles in mud.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely needs to be fixed. I'm not arguing that point. I'm just saying maybe this is also time just to rethink, given we have not had significant rain in a period of time, and it's just to keep grass green and nobody sees.
Sharon, will you talk to the landscaper about potentially turning off the zones in the back? If that's okay with council?
To shut off all the zones?
In the
And shut the
back?
whole system off because it's not,
Yeah,
the
shut it
water's
off.
not getting anywhere except that one
Okay.
spot.
But it's the sprinkling system that's bad is in the front. Yeah.
But shut it all off and figure it out.
Okay, I'll ask them to shut it all off. Okay.
And I don't know what it's been in the past, when we've had them to come out and investigate, 100, 1,000, 200,000, people are a lot, but
Remember a year ago we had a repair at the park and we had a repair here, and it was about, I think it was 800 there and 600 here.
It's not cheap.
No, it's not. I'd like to give at least a blanket of $1,000 for Cheryl to be able to spend to investigate and potentially repair, so it doesn't have to come back to council a month from now and then go through legal and then get through bids and it just, if it's $1,000 repair, we can just be done with it.
Is that a motion?
Yes, motion of $1,000.
Second my motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Parking lot.
Last year we spent money to repave the parking lot and trails that are asphalt at the park. That parking lot was put down the same year as the town hall parking lot. As the park and the town hall were open in the same year. Obviously, the park gets more traffic than the town hall, but if we don't seal over that parking lot, this parking lot like we did the town hall, we are going to have problems. So all I would ask is that we motion to approve to have Cheryl collect some bids. Not spend any money, just collect bids.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Now that, Cheryl, are you good?
Yeah, and I mean, on that, you just wanted our parking lot, not the shared road.
Right, correct.
Okay. So
Does
shared,
DOT maintain the shared road?
no, that's a joint venture of us and Aston.
And I don't think
And that
road is in
probably-
bad shape, the parking lot needs.
That gets more traffic though, because like all the Novant traffic can use it too, so.
We then negotiate a deal where it's prorated by usage.
Toll road?
I think it's owned right down the middle, half and half. I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the way they do. Yeah. But you don't want to do that. You just want ours. Okay.
That comes to us when it's down there.
Then we can have a conversation. About it, so. All right, so that brings us to the planning board report.
One clarification, I want to make sure that we should, the money for sprinklers is going to come out of the contingency fund.
Oh, the $1,000? Yeah, you made a motion to spend, but you didn't make a motion to move it.
I'll make a motion to move 1,000 from contingency specifically to handle those, hopefully, $1,000 repair,
Second.
up to $1,000 repair.
Because we don't have enough money in the budget for that, when we're calling the land maintenance for town hall.
Yeah, I don't think we budgeted that much.
And the land maintenance is,
I just didn't know if it was under land maintenance.
The land maintenance just grass cutting.
Usually that covers growing and blowing, and that's pretty much it for town hall.
Maintenance services.
The land maintenance is at $425 a month. And then, so there may be a little bit, but there's not much extra.
I just wasn't sure where you were going to put this charge.
Yeah. hmm That
so
would
we
be.
want to move it from contingency into land maintenance?
Mhm.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. So now we're at the planning board report and comment from the planner.
I'll make a report on our last planning board meeting. The only item worth discussing about was our review of the RA40 subdivision, or RA40 zoning, specifically the table of uses, and specifically the things we changed a year ago, and looking at just those uses. So after discussion, the majority of the planning board suggested that we roll back 10 uses from permitted by right with stipulations to conditional use. You guys get a copy of that list?
Yes,
No. I don't have next month's agenda, so
At this very moment, there is not anything on it.
okay.
At this very moment.
I'm going to get past something.
You already got that.
I doubt it.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
Anything from you, Mr.
I guess one of the things to note is we're starting to see some things getting turned down by the Union County Public Works for sewer capacity issues. Heritage, that plat had let you know that a new section, a new phase of it was kind of under review. They submitted, we sent back comments to them. I got a letter probably right after the last council meeting saying that they had denied capacity for them, basically put them in line maybe. So it's possible that that phase of Heritage will be quite significantly delayed. Still waiting.
Is that Wesley Chapel jurisdiction, or
The portion, well, both, there's portions in Wesley Chapel and Indian Trail, so both portions would be affected by that. I'm not sure what that means for some other things that are pending. We have a use side Target that's looking to go there. Another dentist's office that's looking at some property down the road that may have to go on a septic system, which has some other implications. But it's beginning to be felt, I believe, here. So I would anticipate a significant reduction in big things coming through for the time being. But
Do they follow a formal process, like a checklist when they turn people down?
Yeah, so people submit basically a request with a sketch plan of what they're planning on doing, what the capacity needs are. And so their development engineers will review that, assess what the capacity needs are, assess what the existing capacity is in the 12 Mile Creek Basin, and let them know whether or not they have the ability to get guaranteed capacity at this point. And so then I think a question arose about what happens if you don't get it now. I asked Crystal, the engineer, over that, and apparently we don't have to have anything approved locally here for them to get in line. They just have to go through the review process with the county to get in line. Of course, they wouldn't be able to take advantage of reserve capacity until we approve something, but they can essentially get a place in line without our approval.
Well, let me ask this question, and we may talk about this later in the agenda specifically. Do you think the county is denying an application or might deny an application to strong arm municipalities into flipping the bill or a percentage of the bill for sewer capacity as we move forward? That's
a loaded question right there.
Yeah.
We had a meeting with county strategic planning guy over public works and the county manager a while back now, it seems. And it seemed like the planning that they're doing, they're doing planning. They have to. DEQ requires you to plan for expansions when you get over 80%. And so they're doing that now. I think they probably have every intention to make expansions when it comes by. Whether they will want you to participate in that is an open question.
Maybe a better way to ask it is, if they had asked for this phase of Heritage a year ago or a year and a half ago, would it have been approved?
If it would have gotten ahead of some other stuff, probably.
Yeah.
My question is, will data be available on what they approve and what they do not approve?
Yeah, so-
holistically across the county?
So they send us a letter.
By municipality?
They sent us a letter. They do not. I asked her about what was in line in Wesley Chapel. She said she didn't have it arranged that way, but she could send me what she had in the 12 Mile Creek Basin, and so I will get that for you and pass it along.
Because I'm interested in.
Yeah, I'll email her right now.
So it brings us to the Parks and Rec report.
I don't see John here. We might want to defer this, see if it shows up later, or do a brief synopsis. Which would you rather? First of all, to answer the question that came up earlier, the issue with the fountain at the park. The old fountain was pulled out. A replacement fountain that we had was put in, and it didn't cost us but the $520 for that work. It would have been a $6,000 plus fee if we had to replace that fountain. Where that spare fountain came from is when we first bought the fountain back in 2015, it came with a warranty. I think it was a 3-year warranty. Within the first year, we had a problem with it, broke. The manufacturer sent us a replacement fountain. We asked them what they wanted us to do with the old one. I said, just throw it away, but have value because the motor shot. I took it home, fixed it. Didn't know if I fixed it or not, but took it apart, put it back together, sealed it up, and when the fountain broke earlier in the month, I took the one I repaired 6 years ago over there. We plugged it in, which is fine. It's been working fine ever since. So, and hopefully it'll last another 5 or 6 years. But apparently the life of those fountains is only short. 6-7 years is tops. The other thing that, for those of you who don't know, we approved the Eagle Scout project.
On the fountain, I read some of the findings on that. Is there anything we need to do to prevent some of those type things from happening again? I'm trying to keep fishing line out, but.
No, when people see a fountain, they think there'll be fish over there that cast into it. You get fishing hooks and lures and all kinds of stuff tangled up in the anchor lines. And, And I asked the guy that pulls it out, the guy that does this from a pond company that deals with these fountains on a daily basis. He said, yeah, they're good for 6-7 years, and then they usually shot them. So it does add a lot of health to the overall pond, the fish, the water quality, everything, because it aerates the water. But yeah, it's
Yeah, I didn't know if there was anything else we needed to do just to kind of avoid like that trouble.
trying to keep the not the beavers, what is it?
Muskrat.
The muskrats, trying to keep the muskrats from building
A
nests
significant muskrat problem.
in the fountain, and we were considering servicing it on the pull out in the winter. The guy goes, "Now just leave it in there as long as it's running, it'll be fine." Won't freeze up. So we had really good luck with it, and like I said, we didn't have to belly up for a $6,000 replacement. So
That's our next problem at the pond.
the water that comes into the pond's about 3 acres. There's a round galvanized pipe where the water goes into the overflow, and that is original from 1972 or 73 when the pond was originally created. That galvanized pipe, which is about 2 feet in diameter, is starting to deteriorate to the point where there's holes below the water level that are letting water in, and the water level, because we have no rain, has dropped down where those holes are, so we're not getting the skimming effect that the drain would normally do for us, and that galvanized pipe has got to be repaired or replaced, and the repaired part is, or the replaced part is not going to be a cheap fix. The pipe goes down under the dam, and then daylight's out to below the dam. That entire pipe would have to be replaced, not just the vertical pipe, but the horizontal pipe as well, which basically means draining the pond, pulling out the pipe, digging through the dam, replacing the pipe. We have no idea what the cost is right now, but it's going to be significant. And it's going to have to be something we're going to have to do sometime in the next 6 to 12 months, probably. So that's where we're at with that. I was hoping John would be here so he'd have more detailed information. But this is not something where we could, and I was joking, where we could get some of that stuff you see on TV where you just slap it on the side of the fish tank and all of a sudden the hole will be filled, because the galvanized pipe is just like flaking off rust from your car. It just comes right off. So there's not much left to it. And not only is there holes in the vertical pipe, there's holes further down in the horizontal pipe. And it's broken many times. So it's lived its useful life.
So now it's going to have Labella, who is our contract engineer, come and work on it.
Just to give us an estimate.
Improvement. We have a quote for $5,100. And we need
Clarify, that's not to repair the unit.
just to research and make a structural engineer fancy drawing.
How?
Just to fix it.
And then we'd have to put it out to bid and go from there.
Any thoughts?
I think we need to do that. I was just looking at the budget to see what we're going to make on the pond maintenance. And so I would make a motion for not to exceed $5,100 for the Labella engineering review recommendations for the override.
Second that.
But do we have a line item? I don't think we have a line item to pay it out of.
I'll give you add that to it. And
Yeah, really, we should move the funds before we
Okay.
commit to spending.
So we would move $5,100 from contingency to pond pickup from
You can do that if you want to, but in this case, you do have funds reserved from fund balance for the park, if you want to use those.
What's in the fund balance, Sheila?
Well, we've got fund balance assigned for future park improvements,
I'm
and
going to consider this as a park improvement. I consider this more of a maintenance issue.
well, it's sort of this was just a council wording. It's not a legal requirement. It's not like the fee and lieu money.
Well, right. Park improvements would be like bathrooms or security cameras or any of the other projects we have planned. This is more of a, we got to fix the drain in the pond.
Well, you do have 93,000 there.
That includes our landscape contract.
Pardon?
That includes the landscape contract.
No, I'm saying in the fund balance, you have 93,000 assigned for the park.
So the question is where you want to pull funds from.
Right.
Contingency or the I would, thank you for pointing that out, so I would go to the fund balance to pull it from that, because there could be a significant work, it seemed to be a part of the agreement by the council finish, so that would seem to be an appropriate place.
Well, I'm hoping that technology's come a little bit better, maybe it'll be a little bit, maybe we'll have more options in the down there.
Right, that's what I'm saying, is that ultimately end up being an agreement.
What did last 50 years?
Exactly.
Now I think at 100.
Hopefully, I don't know next week.
That's what I would do, is do 5,100 from the future, from the fund balance for the park to pond maintenance, and that we approve not to exceed 5,100 for the engineering services to review and make recommendations.
Do you want a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes, so are we tagging this a Dogwood Park improvement? Yes, okay. Will LaVelle's proposal also include steps to get the pond ready in order to install this, i.e. draining the pond? How will we do that?
It says recommended improvements, so I'm thinking that to be, they're going to tell us exactly what we need to do.
They're going to recommend what we do. They're not going to drain the pond.
I'm asking that. I'm asking if they're going to give us the steps that we need to go through, whoever will go through to get to the point of making repairs.
And trust me, there's going to be a lot of steps. We ran into a situation where we had to take a tree stump out of North Dam, and the steps for that is 18 pages long.
But I'm expecting if they don't give us the itemized steps that have to be done, they will tell us what the design needs to be, what the material needs to be, how to do it, all that. That's how I interpret recommended.
I think we clarified that through Cheryl.
Yeah.
Cheryl, clarify that when we contracted them.
What was the exact question?
That they outline detailed steps for how we should improve it.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Not just the fix, but what it takes to get to the fix.
In other words, don't just say put it in a new car.
Yeah.
I could do that for $3,000.
I'll do it for 25.
I can still go out there with that tape from the fish tank guy and just slap it on there and see what happens.
And then lastly, is this something that Lavelle, sorry, thinking about that. Is this something that they are, is this their expertise? I mean, I know it's stormwater runoff and structural design, engineering, all that is part of their bag, but.
This is a different person than Bonnie.
Okay.
This is somebody that does this sort of thing. Mm-hmm.
And our stormwater engineer has a piece of that.
I'm only asking, $5,100 is a lot of money. Should we consider, is this a problem that is this time sensitive, or do you have time to solicit bids?
I'm getting any better.
Okay.
We don't want to kill our customer.
And I also think they also have familiarity with what we have and the things that we've done that we might make other things more expensive.
Did David have that problem without being on Flex Seal? Slap that on there?
So, any further questions? All in favor? Okay. I will say, real quickly, we did get a complaint about the park today, about an exercise group with some inappropriate behavior, including urinating by the dumpsters.
They're 20 steps from the bathroom.
So we're probably going to have to do some investigating.
We're overdue on the security cameras. But we just keep spending money on other things.
I don't think that's going to solve this problem, but we're going to have to, I'm going to wait for John to respond back. So we'll go from there. I just want to make you aware of that.
We can also reach out to Brandon and ask him to step up patrols through the park.
Or if they see the thing called the
Any further park stuff?
There's one other things in relation to this engineering. Anytime we spend the first dollar of engineering fees, there's a general statute that requires us to either go out on bids or to exempt ourselves, and that's what Resolution 2021-11 is for, to exempt ourselves from going out on bids.
So we need to make a motion to pass the resolution. So motion? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. Anything else for the park?
I also wanted to publicly recognize in our regular meeting that we had a special meeting for the Eagle Scout project. Ross Bridgeforth taking on a project to work with the local Vietnam vet to add to the park flagpole, 2 additional flagpoles, one for the state flag and one for the POW MIA flag. And that has been approved and expected to be completed by September.
And then there'll be a ceremony, either on POW Remembrance Day or Veterans Day, when we raise the big flag.
Do you know, is he going to actually do all that work himself, or is anything going to be contracted out? And I'm just asking for insurance. Whenever we have anybody work in the park, we have to get workers' comp and a certificate of insurance.
Well, all of the Eagle Scout projects is going to be done by the Scout and his group. The only thing that can be, I guess, contracted out, and Hargan Electric, who installed the original lights for the flagpole, is going to be taking out single light that's not shining on the American flag and adding a light that will shine on both additional flagpoles.
Okay, we'll need a
The Boy
certificate.
Scouts won't be doing electrical work.
Okay, well, we should get then a permit from him and a certificate of insurance from Hargett.
Yeah.
Anything else for the park? If not, I'm going to move on to item number 10, reviewing recommendations from the planning board on uses of RF40. And then they had a long discussion at council's request. We were concerned about some of the more commercial uses in the RF40 district.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the planning board did have quite a lengthy discussion about this topic at the request of the village council. And in the end, as the chairman noted in his presentation to you, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, I believe, uses were identified. They were listed in the report that I sent you. They recommended those uses no longer be a use by right, but rather be require a special use permit as an amendment. This is not being proposed as an amendment for you to consider tonight, but if you would like to discuss it and set a public hearing based on this, or if you have any additional requests for the planning board to consider further, then we can take it back for additional consideration at your discretion.
So we can talk about it, and if there are changes, we would hold a public hearing and then...
You would send it back to the planning board first for they have made a recommendation, and at this point you could either move forward with a public hearing at our next meeting, or you can send it back to them for further consideration if you think some additional scrutiny needs to be applied to those uses.
Well, it would be fair to say that the table of uses, or the planning board changed the table of uses so that it would all be conditional use under the RA40.
So it would, the effect of the amendment that was endorsed by the planning board would take a number of the uses that were made a use by right in the district and make them, and require a special use permit for them. Some of these uses were previously allowed with a special use permit in the RA40 district prior to the amendment last year. Some of them were not allowed at all in that district, but were included in the previous amendment to either allow them as use by right or the special use permit. And so these are the ones where there was a change. We looked at where there was a change from in the last amendment to RA40, and they went through and looked at each use and discussed and made a recommendation about each use as to whether or not it needed to be changed back to the way it was, or given additional scrutiny through a special use permit.
So all the items that we saw in the table of uses prior to, they're still the use by right.
Today they are, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But planning board identified 8 or 10?
10.
Okay. And can you read that list?
Sure.
And those are still in the table of uses, but they would require special.
Right. So at this point, these are all permitted by right, but recommended for change to a special use permit in the RA40 district. Those uses are animal kennel, animal shelter, churches, community centers, miniature golf courses, village-owned and operated governmental uses, lumber and sawmills, microbreweries, schools of the arts, and schools, sports instructional. Those are all currently permitted as a use by right. The planning board has recommended that those be made a use requiring a special use permit.
I will say I'm disappointed because I expected items to be removed totally, not just made conditional, because I'm thinking about this is done to encourage agriculture and the nature in the area and things. I look at this and I don't see how a church or a community center or a school of the arts or any instructional school is part of agriculture per se. I don't see how having golf courses, which just clear the land, or microbreweries where they have nothing to do with any of the agriculture on that land, have to do. And as I reread the descriptions for even agribusiness and agricultural use, I think they're very broad and open to, because it just says includes and then, et cetera. And frankly, we've been burned in the past because we weren't specific enough. So I appreciate making some things conditional, but I would have liked to have seen some things removed and been a little more aggressive with the changes.
And I will say I talked to a resident, and I believe there are some definitions that I think are not the same depending on who you talk about. Like when I think School of the Arts, I think about my friend who sent her dancer off to School of the Arts for the whole school year. And this resident was talking more about like a small scale, hands-on, like woodworking class, which I can see as promoting agriculture, whereas a ballet school is not. So I wonder if some of the terms in here are not quite what they should be. I also talked to this resident about what he would like to do on his property, and what was described to me, like when you think sawmill, you think 18-wheelers coming in, bringing all this wood, a lot of traffic and all this stuff, kind of like the logging up here and that being sent somewhere. And what he was describing was a much more small scale use. It didn't really hit me as like a sawmill type. Is there a different, are there different definitions? Are there different words?
There's certainly, I don't know if there's a much of a distinction. One of the reasonable, objective ways to classify something like a sawmill differently from another sawmill that's larger in scale would be to like set some limit on the number of board feet of lumber that are produced each year. I don't know if that's I don't know what a reasonable number is. I don't know if that's the level of detail we really want to get into. And I don't know, not having the benefit of being involved in the initial discussions about the RA40 district, I'm not sure of the origin of why some of these things went into the RA40 district while others didn't, and because the School for the Arts I think was added in there because it's permitted right now as a special use also in the R60 and R80 districts, which are, I guess there's one parcel that's R80 or something like that, and not any R60 in town. So some of those things that maybe fly under the radar and was done for consistency's sake, it's not allowed in the R40 district as a special use. If the council's intent is to take the RA40 district and make it much, much more purely agricultural in its intent through the uses that are permitted either by right or with a special use permit in the district, we can certainly go back to the planning board with that instruction and take another swipe at it and potentially remove some other things that would lead in that direction. But that's up to you what you want to.
Because even when I read the thing about if I'm salvaging fallen trees, so they don't just go to a landfill or something, or be burned, just for the heck of it, and I want to make them into boards that I can then do something with, to me is very different from a lumbering and sawmill operation, to me at this point. Just very different, right?
Sure.
I don't know how you classify that. But then if that's also combined with something like, oh yeah, we're going to have a little woodworking shop and we're going to teach a few people, to me that's no different than if or very similar. Like I'm a blacksmith and I'm going to teach a few people to be a blacksmith. Talking like a handful of people, not any scale of instruction, like very small number of participants or students, if we need to limit that or something. But that to me is very similar, is that you're using this land, you're passing along some crafts and knowledge and stuff. Seems appropriate and consistent with what I think agriculture historically has kind of included. But I don't think the way this is worded supports that, and in fact it kind of encourages, well, let's just go call the trees down, so that's all.
Or a golf course.
Or a golf course, and I just can't allow that.
What do secondary uses, how do they impact what we would deem as use by right category? For example, Dolores point, I did really good this year growing zucchinis.
Sure.
And if I want to have a zucchini operation at my house, that's certainly agribusiness. Well, then if I want to spin that over, to your point, and have a school, does that make this business fall into a school category? Or
A zucchini growing school?
Yes.
I think we would, I think that we would look at that from the perspective, it's probably something more akin to the agritourism aspect that is permitted in the district. I don't think there's the teaching of farming skills isn't explicitly called out in the ordinance anywhere, but I think we would probably fit it within there, provided that it was of reasonable scale and minimal noticeable impact. I think you could probably do that fairly easily. My understanding of the use of School for the Arts in here, it's something that's permitted by right in the commercial districts in the village. And so that could be anything, really. A ballet studio or something else. I don't know the specific intent of allowing that originally, why it would be in that district versus not.
What I'm hearing is scalability. For example, my neighbor, he'll take down trees off of his properties and he'll make birdhouses.
Sure.
And he might even put a couple down by the end of the driveway and say, birdhouses for sale, $5.
Sure.
And I don't think any of us are going to go after this guy because he's selling birdhouses for $5 at the bottom of his driveway.
Right.
And he might even have some of the neighborhood kids come over and he teach the kids how to build birdhouses.
Yep.
But does that mean he's going to have a 2,000 square foot retail shop to sell birdhouses next year? I don't think so. So it all has to do with how do we, it's got to be something that's scalable.
Yeah, the definitions for the agribusiness side of things include, I believe, some definitions about size or some limits on size. But those other uses, there would be no, those that are permitted by right as of now, there wouldn't be any real restraint on.
I mean, even when you talk about the agribusiness description, agritourism description, I think they're still too broad. I don't think things are specific enough for the things we would encourage or discourage. And when I think about the agribusiness, well, if it's less than 5,000 square feet, 10 parking spaces, that still feels like a lot, for something that literally could be next door to R40 with one house on it.
It could be, yes.
Right? And so when I kind of put it in that context, it's like, wow, would you really want that?
I agree.
About some of these things.
I think that one of the issues at play here is that so the RA40 district apparently existed for quite some time in the ordinance, and it had been applied to a relatively small portion of the village. And so there's not really a very well-defined agricultural area. You don't have a 1 mile ETJ or something like that, where you just, this land out here that's very rural. Urban development is coming from most sides right now. And so I think there's utility in it, in having those people that want to farm, having something that is very accommodating to them, because we certainly, the plan encourages that and notes the loss of agricultural lands here. And I think if it was maybe looked at from the perspective of where, I think the lack of a clear understanding of where this might be now or in the future can lead to some apprehension about any of these things being allowed. There's you'd be worried about.
I think everybody wants to promote agro-businesses, but at the same time they want to try to keep some kind of bubble on it so it doesn't just,
Sure, there really wouldn't be a whole lot of constraint on a real bona fide agricultural related business going in the RA40 district right now. I think that was the intent when it was originally discussed. I wasn't here, but I think that was the intent, to provide more freedom. If the whole district needs more looking at, and that's something that can be done as well. If it's not just uses, if it's the whole concept, then we can do that too. But I think there's going to be a variety of perspectives on which way it needs to head. And I think if the council could provide some very clear direction with what it is expecting, then that would certainly help the planning board in their formulation of a response.
Well, to me, it's like, I think, land use, gardening, embracing the land, embracing nature, growing things, whether it's plants that are edible or other types of plants. I mean, that's really agricultural and what's supported. But in theory, I could take my request to rezone my R40 lot and say, I got this little small greenhouse back here in my backyard, and I'm going to sell stuff out of it.
but there's also, a sawmill, you think these big buildings,
Yeah.
a sawmill could be something that fits in my garage. I have a small, but still. And I use that as a hobby. So right now my hobby is cutting logs in my garage on the weekends.
But
When
there's
it turns
how
in-
much that can do. too,
Right, but when that turns into a business is when I hang a shingle out by the road that says, Mike's Lumberyard, and School of How to Cut Logs, that's when,
Yeah, but if you're doing that on 1 acre, I might care. If you're doing that on 20, I probably don't care.
exactly.
So
That's
maybe
where-
there's some better,
It maybe comes down to more of the definitions on the side of things, on this part.
'Cause even,
minimum lot area.
And nobody's trying to do this on half an acre,
I think, one of the issues is that right now, any of the RA40 land in town, somebody can come subdivide it and have
yes.
acre lots, and then everybody could have their own, to be a community of lumberjacks. Tongue in cheek, of course, but that's, the real agriculture takes place mostly on more than an acre of land that we would consider to be agricultural. And so, like I said, maybe something that's not RA40, maybe that district transitions to something that's just the agricultural district. And I think understanding the utility of that and how it would be applied and where it would be applied. I know that there was some interest, folks on the planning board in doing that earlier this year, looking at expanding its application. And maybe some changes to the district itself would be in order in terms of the size of, the minimum lot size requirements, increasing those to make it less of a potential concern for somebody to be located on a very small piece of land, relatively speaking, and doing some of these things versus if you have 10 acres or something along those lines.
And as we have an application, I feel like we're obligated to do something productive.
But how do we maintain some type of control, Lori? without getting down and identifying every possible use. We don't want to do that.
Well, I think I think there's places we need to be more specific and not quite as broad, like school, or whatever that, because I want to teach a few people how to do a craft, doesn't mean that's a school, right? So we don't have those kind of things. And when it talks about something that you're going to be, you're going to sell and you're going to have it, we're measuring at parking places and maybe and size of the building, maybe there's a different measure to use. And to Ron's point, like a different lot size, right? When we think about some of these things. I just think there are some things that just we really don't want. But when I look at things like participatory farm, farm-based tourism driven enterprises, you can come and just be a working farm. That sounds cool, right? I'm okay with that. Or wine tasting room, as you're growing you have a vineyard there. So I think there's some things that make logical sense, and then things that just don't make sense to me. If we're really trying to do this to maintain agriculture, a golf course just doesn't make sense.
The things that don't make sense,
Take out.
take out completely?
Yes.
Or?
Just because they were there historically, I don't mean it means they need to stay. And to my knowledge, we don't have any golf courses that would be impacted if we change that.
Well,
Or pending golf courses.
does a church or a community center promote agriculture when they're allowed by right in several other zoning districts?
We just have to make sure that with the church aspect of things, we just need to make sure that there weren't any other assembly type uses permitted in the district if we're going to take churches out.
And that kind of gets in the conversation we had last month about schools and churches and exactly what are we allowed to limit or not limit and everything else. Because when I think about, some of the churches, the building itself might not be that big, and then there's this huge parking lot,
I was always under the impression that the RA40 district is to help promote agricultural uses in the village. And I definitely, and there's some on here that do not.
And maybe we looked at RA40 because it existed, and we're like, hey, make it into agricultural district, when maybe agricultural district is more of what we think of when we're reading that. I don't know.
Well, then, will any agricultural type use be affected as a retail use as well? I mean, does that have an impact on what you're thinking?
I'm thinking like if I have a nursery or I have a greenhouse or I'm growing 1,001 zucchini and I want a farm stand to sell them, I think that's appropriate. I raise pumpkins and I'm going to do, come figure your own pumpkin and a hayride in it. I don't have a problem with that. But that's going to be not a daily thing. It's not going to be a high volume thing daily. And it's not going to be a large scale operation. I think that's the other piece I think of is like if somebody wants to teach somebody how to shoe horses, they're not going to have 50 people showing up every day, every day of the year.
So is your recommendation to send this back to planning board? With what directive?
I would like to see the uses carefully reviewed to make sure that they promote agriculture. And I would like to maybe see a few of these things that, like School for the Arts. If what people are really doing is wanting to do like small scale trade programs, is that a School for the Arts or is that a?
There is no definition of school for the arts in the ordinance.
So maybe we could say,
eye of the beholder,
while
really.
we're talking, our School for the Arts is classes.
And I'm not thinking of them as schools, I'm thinking of them as classes, workshops, which is different to me than a school.
Sure.
So define it with the number of participants.
Or something.
You're going to have a animal kennel. How many acres are you going to put that on? You're going to
It says
have
animal, it doesn't say dog. What other kind of animals are you going to have?
Lions and tigers and bears.
I appreciate their efforts in making them conditional to try to give us more of a say-so in what's happening. But maybe there's a way that the village can have a say-so in some of these things, and take some of the fear away of the unknown is by defining them and not necessarily making everything a conditional use permit.
And I feel like they approached it as they were constrained to keep whatever was on the list. And I don't think they must not have felt comfortable saying the legal uses. Or whatever.
There were a variety of different perspectives about
This is not
the intent of the district. And I think the council provides clear direction to pare down the number of uses that are permitted under any circumstance in the district, then that would help to and with if the intent is to make it much more purely an agricultural district intended to promote agricultural and not things that are not agriculture. If that was the council's direction, then that would help the planning board.
Yeah, I don't see how dog kennels would be agricultural, but just, that's a business. So,
And even like I think about a welding shop, and I'm like, yeah, I've had a lot of farmers that I weld.
that's a hobby, but not as a business.
Not as a business, but they might want to be able to teach other people how to weld. And, you know, so I think that's the nuance piece to me, that I can word that one. With welding shop.
Well, it would help if you wrote up specifics to send to the planning board, or maybe even attended the next planning board meeting as a council person in, and,
I don't know my schedule that far out, and I'm happy to write up my thoughts and, share via email.
Was the bed and breakfast item discussed?
It was. There was no. The planning board members did not see any issue with that. At least a majority of them didn't have any issue with that.
And I don't see how that's most agriculture.
I'd ask all the council members if they have the opportunity to write up what their specific concerns are, and have them, before planning board, before the next meeting, let them take another shot at this, and see if we can get it back before council following month. See any problem with that, Vaughn?
John, there's something on your agenda now.
Got something on the agenda.
David and I have a meeting prior to that, so I'll try to stick around for the planning board meeting to answer questions. David, are you willing to stay?
Sure.
David and I'll plan to stay, be able to answer planning board questions. So for number 11, can we just continue if the applicant is agreeable? Yes?
Yes.
Is the applicant agreeable?
What if I say no?
You can't say no.
I mean, I don't want to do it now. Sorry, we don't want to do it. Okay.
So you want us to make a decision tonight?
I'm just telling you, we don't want it.
So that means we have to have the public hearing or have the vote?
Public hearing is ongoing. Cheryl,
I mean,
do you recall?
you can continue the public hearing.
We can just when we want to.
You may continue it, but obviously at some point you have to make a decision on it.
Council? You okay continuing?
I'm going to continue it, but I think, nothing happens quickly in government. We all know that because we're all part of it. But I hate the red tape that we create. I really do. I mean, it's a simple thing. We should be able to just be done with it, but it's all the legal stuff that the lawyers make us jump through and the planning and zoning department make us do, and it just bugs me that we have this much red tape over something that's so simple.
Do we need a motion to continue?
Yes.
I'll make a motion.
And motion to continue it to a specific time and date,
To
whatever your next meeting is.
September
13th, I think.
September 13th. Was that a
Motion
motion?
to continue the public hearing for RZ 2101 to September 13th. That's 7 p.m.
At Town Hall.
at Town Hall in the village of Orange.
Okay. That way you don't have to advertise it again.
Your second? I'll second it. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right.
Can I
I'm
just say?
opposed.
But I would just like to say that, you know, what the applicant has shared with us about the desire to meeting is actually part of us rethinking this and what it means because of an interest in supporting agricultural. I think.
It's so simple.
Well, we're so simple, like we might have done it right the first time.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't like the system, and I'm part of the system. Sorry, John.
Well, senior living was simple too, and we see what happened when we rushed into that. And John, too, I'm sorry. I mean, I understand his concerns about wanting to move forward, but there's just, I don't know, there's too many questions.
Yeah. Problems that exist to this day. All right, so that will skip us on down to item number 15, which is public hearing on proposed zoning ordinance text amendment TA 21-01 for accessory structures.
You skipped 13 and 14?
Oh, skip 13. Oh, 13. Sorry, folks. It's so nice to have people with us. All right, public hearing RZ 21-02 request to rezone 11.9 acres at the intersection of Waxhaw Indian Trail and Beulah Church Road.
Ready?
Did you open the public hearing?
Do I open it or do Vaughn start us off first?
Okay. Usually you open it, don't you?
I think you opened it first.
Yeah.
All right, so
I'm not
I'd
sure
like
what
to
your
open the
usual
public
practice is,
hearing
but-
for RZ 21-02.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The owner of the property located at 4821 Waxhaw Indian Trail Road, which is Central Church, has submitted a petition to rezone their property from R40 to office and institutional. The parcel in question is approximately 11.9 acres in size and is home currently to both Central Baptist Church and Arborbrook Christian Academy. There are maps attached for your reference. Parcel in question. Immediately adjacent to this property, there are subject properties that are zoned R40 by the Village of Wesley Chapel, Union County, and the town of Weddington. Of course, similar in nature, but different given the jurisdictional differences. There are also commercial zoning. We have a parcel zone B2 across the street, home to a gas station. And a parcel diagonally across Beulah Church Road, intersection with the subject property, is also zoned B2 by Union County. And again, a zoning map of the parcel and the surrounding areas included in the report for your reference. So, regarding the current use of the property, both the church and the school operating on the church campus are technically legal non-conforming uses. The church has been there longer than the village has existed. The district within which the church is situated, R40, would require a special use permit to establish a church. They do not have one. They can continue to be a church as long as they want to. If they wanted to change anything, they would have to come and get a special use permit for that. If it was rezoned to O&I, however, the church would be conforming as such uses are permitted by right in the OI district. The school is in a little bit different situation. It was originally established on the church campus about 15 years ago. And at that time, there are no known approvals from the village saying, sure, you can start a school here. It's our assumption that at that time, as now, a special use permit would have been required for a school in the R40 district as it is now. Subsequent to the school's founding, they did approach the village on 2 different occasions. One to initially receive a special use permit for the placement of a mobile classroom on the site, and then at a later date, they received an amendment to that special use permit, which eliminated the, I believe, 5-year requirement for them to come back and basically like recertify or get another extension of their permit to keep the mobile classroom there. So it's not that there was not any knowledge of the village that the school was operating on the church property, but there was never a formal original approval of the church. The school on the church property. And that last interaction with the village occurred with regard to that special use permit was in 2014. So there's been some tacit, if not fully formal, approval of the operation of the school by the village for around 12 years. So operating under the general assumption that there had been some approval by the village of the school has been planning to acquire land for its future expansion from the church. And in our discussions with the school leaders and church leaders regarding this, given some of the intricacies of the zoning ordinance, it was determined that a rezoning of the property to the office institutional district would be the most prudent step for them to seek approval, because in the O&I district, the requirement for a church to have 3 acres and a school to have 9 or 10 is not required in the O&I district. There's no minimum lot size. As it is now, remaining in the R40 district, neither could really legally establish themselves because neither has enough land to be there. The church could be there on its own, but then there wouldn't be enough land for the school, technically, which creates a range of catch-22 situations with regard to their plans for expansion. And so we discussed that with them and identified rezoning to the I district as probably the path forward that would provide them an opportunity for both entities to achieve their future goals, if approved. Our future land use map, we looked at it and reviewed that with the planning board regarding this property. That whole tract and that kind of triangle there between the 3 roads is designated as low-density residential on the tract. Across the street, the gas station is designated on the future land use map as high-intensity commercial. Future land use map is included in your packet in the report as well. By the written policies in the plan document itself, a rezoning from R40 to O&I would not be wholly consistent with either the low-density residential designation on the future land use map or with the policy statements in the plan document which seek to limit the application of non-residential zoning outside of the limited number of areas, primarily here along the NC 84 corridor where non-residential future land use classifications are currently designated. Of course, we often find churches, schools, things like that in areas that are not commercial in nature. So their existence in a residentially designated area would not be out of the ordinary. So the other thing to note, if it is zoned O&I, anything that's constructed larger than 2,000 square feet as it currently stands, the ordinance would require a special use permit. So this would not confer the right to go out and build a 40,000 square foot school on the site. There would be additional review. It would enable a path forward for the church, for the school to acquire land from the church to be able to pursue financing of the construction of their own building on the property. Of course, we don't know, they can do anything they want to after it's zoned. If it is rezoned to O&I, they can sell it to somebody else who could seek approval to do something else. But it's our understanding from our discussions with them that their plan is for both entities to remain in place. So the planning board did hear this petition and welcomed representatives of both the school and the church at their June 28th meeting. Following the presentation by the church and the school, the planning board discussed the matter and did unanimously vote to recommend approval of the proposed amendment to the village council. When they did make the recommendation, they adopted a statement of consistency noting that the proposed rezoning was, although not consistent with the future land use map, it was partially consistent with policy 300 goal 2 of the plan, which states that office and institutional uses should be clustered in the vicinity of major intersections, of which this has several very close by to it and commercial uses around it. I'm sorry, Mike, were you?
Is the school and the church 2 separate entities?
They are separate entities.
They're
But it's the same building?
They jointly use some buildings. The school is a separate legal entity and is a tenant on the church campus now. They look to become at least a partial owner of it, and they can probably say it better than I can. So I'll be quiet.
Do we do public comments first? Or
Let's go ahead and, I guess, hear from them first. And just, Mayor, if you note, both Councilman Como forwarded me an email he received from a constituent, and I received an email from a constituent on Sunday, both wishing to comment on the case, neither of whom I believe are here unless Miss Mary Culpepper is here. No? Okay. So we have two comments that I can do after they go.
Council, thank you for having us today. I could just start with answering your questions, Mike, or Yolanda Baker, for those of you that I haven't met.
Address for the record?
1222 Breon Court, Exxon, technically Weston Channel. Noting that, but I am on the board of Arbor Brook Christian Academy as the board facility chair. And I have with me head of school, members of the church, including the pastor, members of their board, and our board chair and our board members as well. As Yvonne indicated, our intent is to purchase 1 acre of property from Central Baptist so that we can construct our own building on the property. However, we will continue to use the church buildings and the property, including the parking. We will continue to share all parking, continue to share all of the buildings that are there as well. So, any specific questions that I can answer?
Most of this seems to be grandfathered in from what I can tell. So.
Yeah, under some.
Catch-22.
If you require this, if you recall the statute of limitation issue that we had with our friend with the woodworking, the once woodworking shop, now irrigation shop in his backyard. We probably don't have. If we wanted to throw them out, we probably couldn't, which we don't want to do. But so they're essentially a legal. Both are legal, non-conforming uses because of the zoning district they're in mostly. The church would become conforming in O&I. The school would have a path to becoming conforming in the O&I district. As remaining in the R40 district, neither really, with the school remaining on the site, neither could really become conforming if push came to shove. If either wanted to really expand or change much.
Well, let me ask this question. The property around you would come up for sale. Would it be your intent to buy more land and expand the campus even further?
If the current property around the Central Baptist property or the property?
In the adjacent properties that are around your existing property.
I think it's something that we would consider.
Okay.
Yes.
Some of which are in Weston Chapel and some of which are not.
Right.
But not going across the street. If you could, same side of the street, same corner.
Oh, right. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
But again, any improvements larger than what square footage?
2,000.
Okay, we come back to us.
Anything.
And we do have the intent to construct. We've gone down that path of sharing that with you as the town, that our intent is to build our own building approximately between 11,000 square feet, 2 buildings. But we would do phase 1 first and then phase 2 on down the road.
Well, I'm always impressed when I drive by there when school's either letting out or getting in that you have so many cars in the parking lot, you never seem to disrupt traffic.
I try very hard to make you get continue.
It's the highest compliment. Thank you so much. I'll let Officer answer no.
Given the amount of space you have to work with.
There's 2 people on his board, myself included, that work facilities management, real estate, and he does a really good job of making sure we stay out of the road.
And see the little
How many students are enrolled?
There will be 225 enrolled this coming next week.
Next week, geez.
And that's K through...
K through 12. Yes, sir.
And with the expansion, your goal is to have?
I would say that we are balancing our growth, right? I would say we could target close to 400, maybe doubling in size, but we would do that thoughtfully, prayerfully, because our school model is very important to us, our mission, which is we have small classes. And we have a very close-knit community of parents, and we all know as you continue to expand, you can get away from your mission. So it would be a very thoughtful approach as we grow. Right now, with the students that we have, we need more space. So to get to that maybe 400 number is probably a while off.
Well, if you were to double your capacity, what would that do with your, when I just give you the greatest compliment on the fact that you don't have any problems with traffic? Is that going to be, are we creating a problem?
I don't think so. We have a general contractor and engineer that's helped us look at the property from a master plan perspective. We didn't just look at if Arbor Brook expands. We looked at if Arbor Brook expands on that property, what would it look like if we had double the cars that we have now? So we would be expanding some of our parking, which would mean we would expand our carpool to continue to get the cars off the road as much as possible. We would rework the ingress and egress, and the roundabout, to be honest with you, has helped tremendously with being able to have that ability to keep the cars off the road, even with additional parking. So when we have special events, sporting events, we have quite a few cars there. We're still not, we're getting them in the parking lot and parked and not really experiencing the backup. So my point is we're really looking at the master plan of the property and how we impact it as we grow. And if we get to that point where we're impacting it too much, right, then we have to go back to the drawing board and as a board and as a school and church.
So since it is a school, there will be traffic impact analyses required for their eventual expansion plans. And so that's going to have to go up to Raleigh to MSTA within NCDOT for review since it is a school. So there will be scrutiny, and we know how long that takes sometimes. I hope y'all are still working on that.
Right now, is the parking lot right in, right out, or is it full travel in both directions?
Well, we have a carpool that goes in by the lower school, right closest to the corner to the roundabout. We have our K through, K, right? K that goes in there, and then our main entrance is where the rest of our cars enter, and they enter out on Beulah Church. So they enter in off Blackside Indian Trail, exit on Beulah Church.
But it is a right turn.
Right turn.
Right, it is a right turn.
You can't make a left turn coming out on the
You can, but most of them are going around.
Yeah.
DOT may require right turn.
Right.
Right in, right out, only then use the roundabout to
Right.
spin around just for, yeah. You're lucky you have two roundabouts.
You don't hear that very often.
So I said we're very thankful for the roundabout now. So
How many modular units do you have on site now?
how many ones?
Modular units?
We have one.
Okay. And I know this is thinking of ways out, but is the plan with the expansion to remove the modular units?
Yes. That would actually be the first building that is removed, replaced with a new building.
Well, I'm interested in what Vaughn has to read out to us from the other two people who had public comments, because I know one was pro and one was con. So I'd like to hear the downside of this, if there is one.
Sure, I will.
Not to cut you off, though.
Do we go through this list first?
Yeah, you can go ahead. I mean, whatever your pleasure. I can
Those
read
are all
those.
members of our, we just thought we needed to sign in for public record.
Or would anybody like to speak? You want to 3 minutes?
I would, actually.
Come on up here and give your name and address. Got to make it official.
I'm Larry Helms. I live at 407 Harbor Lane, Monroe. Just right outside of Winston Chapel. I am an officer of the church and the board. We actually went out and polled our neighbors. Actually went out and spoke to them. All the ones that we spoke to were in favor of the things. We explained what we were trying to do as a church and a school, and they agreed with that picture of their community being that way. That's the only comment I have.
Anybody else? Not we'll read the other comments.
The first comment was forwarded to me from Councilman Como. This is from Mr. Francisco Espinoza, the owner of Nina's Market at 4824 Waxhaw Indian Trail Road. He says that he thinks that the request to change the zoning for the owners at 4821 Waxhaw Indian Trail Road from R40 to OI will be beneficial for their future management and development of the property as a school and church. I am in support of the zoning change from R40 to office and institutional. Signed, Francisco Espinoza. The second email was sent to the planner email address on Sunday. This is from Mary Culpepper, who is a resident of Quintessa, and she states that this is a very bad idea. The traffic circle already has heavy traffic and is inadequate to handle emergency vehicle and added traffic. She might have had a mistaken belief this is a nursing home facility, creates noise, traffic, and unsafe environment to nearby neighborhoods. So,
That's going on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Right.
there you go. She referenced the rezoning, so maybe there was a little bit of a mix-up with her, but I thought I'd pass that along. There's concerns about traffic around there from her.
But at this time, we're not looking at increasing the student body with the rezoning. That would come with.
We don't have any limits on the. We don't have any limits on the student body.
At this time.
At this
but
time.
If they come to us for a future thing.
I think we would consider any kind of noticeable expansion of the school would require a rezoning first to O&I so that they could get a special use permit for the school. So basically, we're kind of a holding pattern right now where now that we are knowledgeable about what's there, we establish a baseline, see that there is an issue from a zoning perspective with the conformity, and say that, okay, now you're moving forward, we need to make sure that we're following all the correct procedures.
So, any further questions from council?
I did have one resident call me when they saw it was a rezoning, just concerned in general about rezonings, particularly for commercial use or other non-residential use. And when I explained the request, because they weren't familiar with the church and the school, and I explained what it was, what was already there, and a little bit of the history that you had shared with us, they were like, okay, that's okay. So it was a little bit of the difference of rezoning for a purpose of an existing established facility compared to rezoning to do something new that wasn't residential. So just sharing that.
Any further comments or questions? Anyone like to make a motion?
Close.
Oh, close the public hearing for RZ 21-02. Council, any discussion or motion?
Make a motion we approve the rezoning request of RZ 21-02. Well, I need a statement of
We
consistency.
do need a statement of consistency, and we also need a statement as to whether or not the proposed rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest. I thought that the planning board statement of consistency is very accurate, and so that could be adopted, but we need further. The planning board wouldn't have to do the statement of reasonableness. You would need to adopt a statement as to whether or not this action is reasonable and in the public interest.
Okay. So the planning board's statement of consistency was the proposed rezoning was not consistent with the future land use map, but partially consistent with policy 3 under goal 2 of the plan, which states that OI uses should be clustered in the vicinity of major intersections.
That was what they adopted as their written statement. Yes.
Okay. But you're saying that we also need a statement of reasonableness?
That's correct. So when the text of the statute is when adopting or rejecting a petition for a zoning map amendment, a statement analyzing the reasonableness of the proposed rezoning shall be approved by the governing board.
Okay.
More of that red tape we talked about earlier.
I guess my statement of reasonableness would be that it basically brings it into conformance with past, with the uses prior to the village being formed.
And lessens the degree of nonconformance of the existing uses there.
There you go.
I did good. You did great.
You have a second?
Second,
Any further discussion?
I like your all's vision. I hope you guys can do that.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
But we're still discussing.
Oh.
It's a long, not always fun process, and we appreciate your patience. And Jordan, you can come anytime, second Monday of the month, 7 o'clock to like 11.
Did you vote?
All in favor?
So I had to sit through the first hour.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
They may want
Oh, yeah. Would you like a copy of our renderings, just for me to see?
I printed them for the week.
Well, what I was going to do was save them for when we come back for our actual approval, so it wasn't going to go waste.
Just give us one.
Here's one.
Give us one.
Oh, you can have copies. Rex, that's my board chair. He doesn't want to waste his copies.
Well, there are no requirements for more copies in the future.
We have a printed.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Yeah, this is when I first was, I dropped by there regularly, because I live in Cody Glen.
Yeah.
And I was astounded to learn there was such a thing as
Come by anytime, I'll give you a tour.
I'll take you up on that.
Sure.
So that first,
It'd be amazing.
this is our first draft of the rendering. Our plan is, especially after we went to the planning board, is to the next rendering will be the full master plan of the property, so that we can see how the entire property flows together.
It's great to see the thoughtfulness and the strategic thinking and the long-term vision and recognition of, building out consistent with your mission. That's very nice to hear.
And the town, because we're part of the community and we do service from the school, the church, and we want to make sure that we're a part of that fabric too, right? So being thoughtful of how we're impacting around us. So
That's what makes you good neighbors. As your neighbors' parents are.
thank you very much.
You guys know we have a very articulate person representing you.
Yes, we
That's
have.
why she's
Put us to work on the park committee, maybe anytime we need us, Mike. Thank you all.
All right, so that brings us to, let me not skip anybody out. The public hearing will be closed on ordinance text note EA 21-1 for accessory structures. So I'm going to open that public hearing. I don't think anybody's signed up. So can I close the public hearing, or do you need to speak during the public hearing? All right, can I close that public hearing?
Yeah, they just made a decision.
So I think we've talked about this briefly at the last council meeting. I think some of you might have been in attendance at one or more of our planning board meetings when the particular text amendment was discussed. This arose initially out of a discussion about mechanical equipment in Pinnacle, and evolved from there to encompass some issues beyond that. The folks here in the office have been dealing with on a fairly regular basis related to accessory structures and the regulations surrounding them. And so we went taking the issues that we knew existed with the ordinance as currently written, we went through it and identified some changes to help clarify the definitions, first of all, to separate accessory structure from accessory use, because those two were being used interchangeably in the ordinance to ill effect. And then adding in some changes into the general regulations for accessory uses and structures found in section 156, 133A. These affect basically every aspect that's currently being regulated in the accessory structure regulations right now. I can go through each of them if you'd like, but feel free to just ask questions as well. And I don't know if Cheryl might have some more direct experience dealing with some of these than I do, since she and Amy deal with these often on a daily, if not weekly basis. So we're trying to respond to concerns from a permitting perspective, as well as to fix some things that appear to be a little bit broken in the accessory structure regulations.
I'm just looking at everybody on the same page. And
Hopefully. What do you think, Cheryl?
I can say a couple of questions. Or
Sure.
Comments or whatever. So, like in the proposed definition and everything, calling out residential use, right, and then elsewhere non-residential. Are those terms actually defined anywhere?
I believe they have, or just given their common meaning.
So non-residential would imply there's not a house on the property? An occupied house on the property? Yeah, that's where I was like, I'm like, what?
I think it would be an accessory, a residential accessory structure would be one associated with a principal residential structure, and that
Maybe
residential structure,
or apartment or something.
yeah, and that residential structure could theoretically be an accessory to a non-residential structure, a parsonage on a church property. There could be a circumstance in which there were.
Yeah, that was my second one, was
Yeah.
that if you have a non-residential use, that you could have a residential facility structure, accessory, built on it. So for example, if it were a church, you could build a parsonage, or, right?
Yep.
Are there any limits to that, to just that particular function, that it must be just for an employee or caretaker? That's the only way you can add a residential on a non-residential lot? Because otherwise, I start with the barn, that's the principal use, and then I want to add a house.
So we use the term residence in the singular in the ordinance. This provision is not currently in the ordinance. The number 6 there under A is basically saying you can't have an accessory dwelling unit on a property, but it exempts residential accessory structures located on the same property as a principal non-residential use where an accessory residence for an employee or caretaker is customarily provided, such as a church parsonage. So we've defined that, we've constrained that fairly narrowly, so it would have to be something where there is customarily a residence provided for an employee. So a church would be the most common. There are, of course, some industrial type places where they provide a caretaker residence. That we really don't have anything like that in the village. I don't think.
Well, if you had a horse stable.
A horse stable, and that could be a place where a caretaker dwelling could be a customary.
But a regular barn.
But it would have to be something special.
Unless it had animals or something.
Yeah, we would definitely look at that. I think in most circumstances, if you had an equestrian use like that, then it would be zoned properly to have a residence there, and so there wouldn't be a whole lot of issue. This is mostly dealing with a purely non-residential situation. We wanted to make sure that churches were covered, just in case somebody did have a parsonage situation.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was very limited.
It's very, very, and we use that again, the term in the singular, so it would be one, without subdividing the property, you could put one, the way that I would interpret it. Okay.
Aren't you still in the public hearing?
She closed it.
You,
I closed it before we started talking.
okay, I'm
So
sorry.
real quick,
Okay.
open and close.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion, we approve ordinance 2021-13, 21 for accessory structures. And then a bunch of statements for that too. Where did that go? Not a second.
Do you need the statements as part of the motion?
The statement of consistency is needed. Well, you can make it separately from the motion, but
I'm trying to find it. Anybody have it pulled up?
No, we will not.
Anybody have it pulled up? Right. These are options.
the planning board statement, I'm sorry, was the requirement for consistency statements for text amendments for abstract things like such. It's kind of tough in most plans to really find something to hang your hat on, but they did find, we did identify goal one in the village in the land use plan, which is to maintain strong low density single family residential character of the village, and we think that the amendments as proposed would be consistent with that because they enhance the effectiveness of the village's permitting staff to be able to accurately regulate accessory structures as they are proposed and brought in for permitting.
So that will be our reasonable and consistent statement.
Only a consistency statement is required for a zoning text amendment. Sorry.
So
Second, Steve.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Question related to accessory building. Sure. So if a resident in a residential lot were to build an accessory structure
Right.
within the setbacks, or not within the setbacks or whatever, but failed to get a permit,
Right.
that would never be known to the county or the county unless someone complained, right? And does that
Not
mean
necessarily
that
the-
routinely
it
to
dep-
find out
It would depend on how big it.
aren't obtained properly?
Yeah, it would
And
probably-
I'm picking on residential because we have one.
There's circumstances out there like that right now that we're muddling our way through. Not
A
necessarily.
lot of times it is from a complaint.
They'll find, the county will usually eventually find them unless they're trying to stick them up in the woods. Because they'll do, when they're doing their big reassessments, they'll use aerial photos to identify changes in land use when they see, so discover new structures that weren't permitted. And they're not going to do anything about it. Unless you build something gigantic, they're not going to do anything about it. And the problem then is if they're not going to tell us necessarily that they've found this thing, but the way that the statute of limitation reads now is that if it's been there long enough, we might not have a lot of recourse because it exists in a government record that we may have had access to, especially this aerial photos that we have in our possession or tax records that we have in our possession. So there can be circumstances where somebody you do it and you do it long enough, and our hands might be a little bit tied.
But there was two concerns. One is that it was done the right distance, the right setbacks, and yada, yada, yada. But the other piece is the tax revenue, the real estate tax revenue that would come with itty bitty maybe, but a lot of little itty bitties out.
Not every structure in the village of Wesley Chapel is on the tax rolls of Union County. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, lovely.
Okay. So, just go with this now. We need a statement of reasonableness. That's just what
For zoning map amendments.
Okay. All right. So that brings us to number 17. Where did that schedule? We have our first meeting in Vaughn wants to speak to him, he can. It was very nice. Thank you, Vaughn. Your coworker,
Bridget.
Britton?
Bridget.
Bridget. I feel like I definitely have an overview of what's going to happen over the next year. We're going to meet 8 to 10 times over the next year as a steering committee. There will be multiple opportunities for public engagement, and we're at our next meeting, Vaughn's going to bring some branding to us so we can work
We actually
on that.
have been working on that, yeah. I've got a couple interesting, maybe just one interesting, but we've got some stuff in mind for that that's consistent with some colors and themes that you've used in the village. And I'll probably be emailing that out to the committee just so you have a chance to take a look at it beforehand and provide comments back to us. Yeah. So the next meeting also plans are to, we do want to go back over the survey with the committee and also do a little bit of a SWOT analysis with y'all and talk about, we have some dates we're working on for some of the initial listening sessions and then the initial community conversations and public engagement, initial stuff that we'll be doing. So we'll get approval from y'all for all that. Keep on moving forward. One of the things I do want to note to the council, just to keep y'all apprised as well, and we'll talk about with the steering committee as well when we meet within a couple of weeks. But the census data, the full census data is coming out in December, right? So this we'll get redistricting data this week, but we'll have the full counts of everything in December. And so there, some of the stuff we're usually, and Bridget had actually already gone through and prepared some analyses of population change and housing, economic circumstances, things like that earlier this year when we first started talking about it. But we're going to probably wait to do some of that stuff just so that we don't redo it again. She jumped the gun on that a little bit, which is fine. She's very eager. But we'll have some interesting things we'll probably come and share with the council as well after we take that to the steering committee, just so you're up to speed on some changes that have taken place in Westlake Chapel over the past decade.
And we did decide that we're going to start meeting at 5:30 before the planning board. It'll keep us to a time frame, and I'll already be here. So
I'll already be here.
And is this a public meeting?
They're public, yes.
That gets published on the calendar and everything? I thought that was
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions about that? All right. So that brings us to item 18. Lori, that was your item you added about village property.
Yeah, so when, we had an issue with the fountain at the pond, at the lake, at the park, oh gosh, and it's like wherever that place might be, it cost us a lot of money. And it was like, hey, we got this one and it's bad, whatever, we'll just throw it away because we have a spare. And
They told us to do it.
no, that's irrelevant, you told us, right? But it kind of came to mind of like, okay, well, that cost us like $6,000. Is there anything from a financial perspective or disposition of village property to have any sort of write-off? I'm sure it was long ago and appreciated, but just kind of thinking, is there some sort of documentation or process we should have when things like that happen
Well,
or come up? That's my only
In this
thought about it.
particular case, we got a replacement for free.
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with that. That's an example. But I'm just thinking, it's like, is that something that we need to have a procedure for, a document for, to make sure we're properly accounting for things or whatever? Because I felt like that might tie into a rules of procedure.
I
And it
believe-
just happens, so
Yeah,
well, as an example.
Good thing. I believe we do for like computers and.
Yeah, it could be
you
just
know,
like a computer. I think it's a much more expensive computer.
There's a whole set of state laws that govern what you can dispose of and what you have to put public notice for 2 weeks because you want to give something to somebody. One time we gave something to Habitat for Humanity or whatever. There is a whole set of rules. I think the thing that happened with this one was that it was deemed worthless, and they said throw it away. But maybe there should be a rule about if something is, and there's very strict rules about employees or council members. You can't even bid on purchasing a piece of property or an item that comes up for availability. So maybe that's the little segment that needs a procedure.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that type of thing. So we were really lucky that Mike took the first one and repaired it, so we had a spare. So we were very lucky. And then we know this thing was trash. We know it wasn't a workable piece, but it was still a village property, and it just made me think, well, what's the procedure for this? And then how is it on the books, the financial books? And is there anything like a piece of paper, like Mike would say, yes, I witnessed the disposal of blah, 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 so we can say, yes, from a financial perspective, we documented it. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of where I was coming from.
As far as this one, as far as the value of it, we purchased a fountain and they were having an issue. It kept shutting off and they came out and replaced the pump. So, I mean, I don't think I even knew where the one that they got rid of was.
Let's say we didn't have a spare. We purchased a new one. We still have this old one. Is there something we should have done about it, documentation, procedural wise? That's my question. Not that we have much property, but I'm thinking with the park, there's going to be things that are going to be coming and we might be purchasing and
I think it's funny that we've had things literally, we've had thousands of dollars of equipment just disappear from the park a few years ago, and we didn't do anything about it. Now we have a $6,000 pump that we replaced for free, and it's an issue.
No, this pump is not an issue. It's the issue that the concern is the disposition of village property. Stealing property is a different matter. We weren't disposing of it. Somebody stole it apparently, and that was
Out of a locked shipping container.
That seems like a very different situation
Yeah.
than this. But you know,
If we use a computer, for example, if this monitor stops working and we have to replace it with a new one, there's obviously a procedure to get rid of this old monitor. But if we say this monitor, replacing it's not going to cost us anything, I'll leave that to Cheryl. Cheryl, we've gotten rid of printers, for example. We've had printers that have crapped out. We've had to buy a new printer. What have we done with the old printers? Because I'm the guy that takes them to the dumpster and throws them in the dumpster.
But there was one that we threw away, and then there's been one that it was under a warranty and
but I'm talking about
was replaced.
A lot of times there's a dollar limit, a value limit. Like it was originally this much, and so anything over, $1,000, once it's end of life or whatever, there's something that has to be done with it, or whatever. I'm just asking. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the state laws around this. It just made me think. Well, what if this? I mean, for example, we've been asked to buy a tractor or a mower or something. What if we have one of those? And suddenly it's like, oh, let's get rid of it. What do we do?
The answer is, as Cheryl said, there's a whole set of statutes that deal with disposal of personal property and whether the value is under $30,000, whether the value is over $30,000, and what procedures you use. There are also provisions that deal with disposal of property that's deemed to have no value. So it depends upon the circumstance as to what the requirements are. So again, if you've got a tractor that say you've used for 20 years and you think it's time to get a new tractor and you want to get rid of the old one, well, you'd have to go through one of the procedures, either a private negotiated sale or an auction, or they have negotiated offer, public auction exchange, advertisement for sealed bids. There are lots of different ways to do it, but it depends upon if it has value. And if it has value, then you have to follow these procedures. And the level of procedure you follow is, at least under North Carolina law, the cutoff point is $30,000. So it's a lot easier to get rid of something that's worth less than $30,000 than over $30,000. It's very easy to get rid of something that has no value. You can basically do what you want to with it because it has no value. Or if it's deemed to determined to have no value, remains unsold or unclaimed after the city has exhausted efforts to sell the property, or poses a potential threat to public health or safety. But again, there's a whole, it's 2 or 3 pages of statutes that deal with how you dispose of private property, or personal property. And there's a whole nother set as to how you would get rid of land and what procedures you have to follow for that. So there is a prescribed set of rules that you follow.
And yeah, and so if you could just give me those statute numbers, I'd appreciate
Sure.
it. I'd like to read it.
Sure, the personal property ones start with 160A-265.
Okay.
And the real property ones start, I guess they're the same. They both start 168-265. So it's Article 12 of Section 160A.
Because it still feels like there should be at least something documented, that something was disposed of, even if it's deemed unvaluable.
And again, you can adopt regulations that set out a procedure if you want to do that. It says, if it's under $30,000, we're going to use this. I'm not sure exactly why you might want to do that, because the statutes are there and the authorities set out in the statute. So I'm not sure there's a particular need to have your own set of procedures, but the statutes allow you to set up your own set of procedures if you want to, within the confines of the statutes.
It does come down to compliance, in my opinion. It also comes down to, well, that was, an asset at one time, and thinking about how different assets we get documented on books. I'll read the statutes and see. This was just an example of something that come up, and again, I know we don't have very much around here, but still, it doesn't hurt to think about things before they become a problem.
So it brings us to the Western Union Municipal Alliance update. We hosted the meeting in July. There were 2 things basically on the agenda. That one was ARP funding. At the time, we found out we were getting our ARP funding shortly after the meeting. Everybody's kind of we don't know what we're going to spend it on, all those stylings. And someone else, I think, expressed interest in giving their money to the county for water and sewer expansion.
Stalin said that?
So, I don't think anybody's definitely decided what they're doing with their money, but there was talk. There was also talk about the frustration of everybody saying that we were getting millions of dollars, which wasn't true for a lot of us. The second item on the agenda was problems with Airbnbs and other short-term rentals like that. Weddington's having a problem in Lake Providence. There's a house that is owned by a rental company. Apparently it's rented out on weekends, and they're having troubles with trash and parties and bachelor parties, and an auto club rented it out one weekend, and they had cars lined up and down the street for detailing. And basically the state says there's really nothing we can do about it. Municipalities have no authority except for noise, nuisance, and traffic. So your best hope is that your neighborhood has an HOA, the state's short-term rental. Although Chapel Hill just passed an ordinance saying short-term rentals must be permitted. So I'm not sure what Weddington was going to look into, the noise ordinance, the noise, and trash issues. But thankfully, we have not had that problem yet. And that was what we talked about. But that was basically it. I think our August meeting is going to be in Stallings, at their new town hall, which is pretty exciting, because they have just started using their new town hall. Any questions?
Yeah, on that, you said it was Waxhaw that was going to pursue the sound ordinance?
No, Weddington.
Weddington. Okay, because I spoke with Lee Jensen specifically about it, and he admitted that that's probably one of his worst ordinances in the entire county. And it needs to be looked at and revised, and he can't do that until he specifically gets asked to do that by one of the county commissioners. So And the other thing, Cheryl was telling me when we got this list on the COVID-19 relief, that there's going to be a meeting, I think you said Friday, specifically at the county level, to discuss how they're going to move forward with their funding. I did speak specifically with one of the county commissioners, and he went out of his way to say, yeah, this money is yours. This is your community, your municipal money, but we're going to do this interlocal agreement where we're going to tell you how to spend it.
Who knows? We'll see, won't we? Because nobody was really happy about that. So, I don't think. All right, so that brings us to our close. No, an update on the ARP. Cheryl? And I know we have to adopt this ordinance.
I left a copy at each of your seats, and really all I did was take the original ordinance and I changed the amounts, and you can see they're in bold type. It went from the estimated to the actual, and we did receive the $278,812.88, which is half of the total that we're supposed to be getting.
Cheryl, is there a time frame on when the budgets have to be spent?
2026. We got lots of time.
So we did, Cheryl, you and I talked amongst ourselves about reaching out to the county about the potential to, if we could even expand water and sewer at the park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't really done anything yet. We had a meeting last week, a Zoom meeting. Michelle Lancaster, the county assistant county manager, organized it. It was a Zoom meeting, and I just mentioned that, you know, our only idea was possibly water and sewer for bathrooms at the park, and I had a feeling she was going to get back to me, but I didn't hear back from her. But I can give her a call.
And maybe like what that might cost.
Yeah, and the thing is, and everybody is still waiting for final rules. This is, when you get in the federal stuff, it's terrible. They're still waiting for federal regs to come out and interpretations, and I'm probably not using the right words, but that's the kind of thing.
Is there a phone number we call, say, hey, can we spend money on this? Yes, no. That's pretty much where.
And you have to be careful, because somebody can tell you yes or no, but if in the end the people that are in power say, you shouldn't have done that, you pay me back. We don't want to pay back somebody $500,000 because somebody told us we could do it. So we want to be very sure. And we do have plenty of time. But and the thing with like bathrooms, I don't know, like, so if we can use it to extend the water and sewer to a certain spot in the park for bathrooms, but what about building the building? And I always had heard that if we have a structure in the park, then we have to have a fire hydrant. You know, how does that work in? And so,
All good questions.
yeah.
Our biggest problem is we got this big chunk of change, we don't know how we can spend it or what to spend it on. But the county will tell us if we leave it up to them.
So do we need any action taken on this?
Yeah, if you would approve the revised ordinance.
So I'll make a motion, we approve the revised grant project ordinance 2021-10 for coronavirus state of